Hello and welcome to Top Story. He took office just over 6 months ago, promising a break with the past. Nicolas Sarkozy has certainly gripped France by the scruff of the neck, exhausting his compatriots and foreign observers with his pace. Dubbed Speedy Sarko by the English language media, he wasted no time in taking on the trade unions to start ambitious social reforms. Neither has he shied away from controversy on his frenetic trips abroad, brokering the release of Bulgarian medics held in Libya and bringing Colonel Gaddafi in from the cold. Then the press pounced on his divorce and his subsequent romance with one of Europe's most desirable celebrities, Carla Bruni. To discuss the many guises of Nicolas Sarkozy, I'm joined now by Danish journalist Asger Munch, who writes for the Politiken Daily. Thank you very much for joining us on Top Story. What is it about Sarkozy that interests your audience in Denmark?
Definitely, it is the change from Jacques Chirac. It's the change having a newer, a younger president who's actually much more maybe attentive to what he says in the media, who's actually a presence. I think presence is perhaps the key word, because Chirac was not at all present in his 12 years in the Élysée Palace.
In a media sense.
In a media sense and in a political sense. I mean, Sarkozy is undertaking every reform by himself, actually. I mean, we're quite intrigued by this president who actually insists on doing everything for himself. It's like a big boss wanting to do everything in the company by himself, making sure that everything is done rightly. And I think this intrigues Danes.
Does it strike them as something American? Is it a sort of Kennedy style of doing things, or just a different style from Chirac?
Maybe even more than that. I mean, I don't think even Kennedy was or the American presidents are this engaged in even the smallest reforms. I mean, it's like nothing is too small for Sarkozy to really get him engaged and to really get him fired up. I mean, he's always onto the big topic of today. If he's not the big topic, then he's definitely going to comment on it. And I think people are really been surprised by this omni-president, as he's called,
or the hyper-president, as some call him.
The hyper-president as well.
And do people in Denmark, so that they've been following these last 7 months quite intensively? Then
I have written quite a lot of articles on the topic, and I mean I don't think I've ever been refused an article. So I mean he has certainly spurred quite a lot of interest in Denmark, not only because of this hyper presidency, but also because of the topics that he's actually putting forth.
Let's talk about the. I mean, one key thing is social reforms. What are the similarities with what Denmark has done?
And this is, of course, we are very interested in that, especially since Danes like to see themselves mirrored in big countries. And I mean, Sarkozy is actually his reforms, labour reforms, are not that liberal actually for a Dane, because what he's trying to do is actually to put forward a system that reminds us very much of our own, and he doesn't conceal this fact. I mean, the fact that he has actually managed to have the unions sit down with the big bosses of the big enterprises, and it's quite a feat. I mean, it's quite remarkable, and this is the way it's always been done in Denmark. And Sarkozy has not hidden the fact that he takes a lot of inspiration and from the Danish system, which is a consensus system where people sit down, discuss, and then we make agreements. We don't make laws, on top of everybody and just hurry through and the reforms.
Consensual system, but in terms of the actual market itself, it's still quite different in Denmark, isn't it?
It is. We have a very flexible labour market, but Sarkozy has not hidden at all that he wants the so-called flex security, where we have a very high degree of social security, but we also have a very flexible labour system. You can lay off people without going through lengthy trials, as it is now in France. And I think he's been very much inspired by this, because he's seen that the labour market that's so extremely rigid in France has to be loosened up a bit in order for France to really cope with a globalized economy.
So flexi security, is that's the right the word? And the other one aspect to that is helping people get a job. You can be fired more easily, but you get more help in finding employment. That's the Danish?
I think if you put it bluntly, I mean, usually French people consider being laid off as almost worse than death. But I mean, it's not that big a catastrophe in Denmark. Of course, it's never nice to be laid off, but you have certain, re-education, reschooling if you're laid off, and it's an entire system that's put into place that he wants to copy as well, and he is actually copying it right now. And that is something that the Danes are very, very interested in.
Let's talk a bit about foreign policy. Do you or your viewers see his so-called pragmatic foreign policy as being pragmatic, or is it cynical, these overtures to Gaddafi, to the Chinese authorities and so on?
I think we've gone from pragmatic to cynical to almost embarrassing. Because I think the welcome he had in store for Gaddafi was, my toes were like this. I mean, you don't roll out the red carpet. I mean, doing business with a leader like Gaddafi is one thing. Everybody's doing it. But there's no need to let him, stroll around in Paris like if he's the king of Saba. I mean, it's the queen of Saba as it is. And his phone call to Vladimir Putin after the elections, that was so fraught that nobody wanted to congratulate him. Only Sarkozy called to say, "Congratulations, Count Vlad." And I think that was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen.
So that raised a few eyebrows in Denmark, no doubt.
It certainly did. It certainly did. And I mean, his voyage to China, where he didn't want to bring his human rights minister as well. I mean, all these things, you have to put them together also to see that he's actually promoted himself as a president who wanted to put forth human rights. France as being the big country of human rights. And this is somewhat of a discrepancy,
You don't think that's something that all leaders do? There's always this talk about an ethical dimension to foreign policy. Then when leaders get elected, they usually behave in a different way, whether they're Sarkozy or somebody else.
Of course, that plays a role, But I mean, there's no reason to flaunt that you're actually contradicting your own views and that you're breaking your own promises. And that's exactly what he's doing. I mean, the visit from Gaddafi was, the red carpet, closing off the Louvre, closing off all bridges on the Seine because he wanted to take a trip on the... I mean, even Parisians were shocked at this treatment, and the Danes are just, ridiculing him because of it.
Relatively briefly, what about his private life? Is that a subject of great interest at home?
Of course it is. I mean, I have written articles about it, and especially since he's dating supermodels. I mean, it's quite a big change if you look at Bernadette Chirac. And I mean, we have to take into account that here's a young president, almost Kennedy-like style, and of course we're going to follow his private life more than we did with Jacques Chirac.
And with his style of clothing and so on, I mean, do you write features on this kind of thing?
Yes,
or is
it's not the only thing. It's not only flaunting his failures in foreign policy. It's also flaunting his success, which is quite new in France. He's removed the taboo of success and of money, and I think this is also a big change in comparison to Chirac.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Asger Munch from the Danish daily Politiken. Do join us for another edition of Top Story at the same time tomorrow.